Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first PROSEU webinar. My name is Giorgio Rambelli. I'm a coordinator for Sustainable Resources, Climate and Resilience at ICLEI Local Government for Sustainability and a proud partner of the PROSEU Consortium. PROSEU is the European-funded project that is hosting our webinar today, and it brings together 11 partners from 7 different European countries with the same aim of mainstreaming and active participation of citizens into the energy union, and to mainstream and see how we can better mainstream decentralized renewable energy sources within the energy transition. So we have quite a good lineup of speakers today ahead of us. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping information. First of all, you probably have realized that all of us are muted upon arrival as attendees. This is to avoid any sort of background noises and to avoid any sort of echo, but you can interact with us at any time through the entire session, through raising your hand, clicking on the hand icon that you can see close to your name, or to simply type in a question which we then read out for you, make sure that you can participate. So that said, and we look forward, of course, to have your questions and your interaction as much as possible. I would like to dig a little bit more into what are the main aims of our webinar today. So the general idea that we have is to provide insight into the current developments of the European Prosumer legislation. We want to really focus on how to share certain guidance, look into national measures that can be implemented or has been adopted by the different member states based on the EU legislation. And in particular, we wish to discuss how prosumer and the view of prosumerism and their interests can be then expressed, included and represented within the national energy and climate plans, as well as into the long-term strategies. So we will start right now with the first presentation of today. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you Marta Toporek. She's working for Client Earth and I'm a proud member of our PROSEU Consortium, who will take us a little bit through an overview of the clean energy package and what does that mean for prosumers. Marta, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. Marta Toporek, Client Earth. We are the organization of environmental lawyers. I will present to you EU Clean Energy Package or Winter Package, how it is called. It is the set of EU legislation, energy legislation, proposed by the European Commission at the end of 2016. Some of the existing legislation to be revised or some new legislation adopted. The package was proposed. Some legal acts have been already agreed, but not all of them. I will guide you through 3 documents, 2 directives and 1 regulation. I thought that these are the ones that are the most relevant for prosumers, because in this legislation there are provisions on prosumers, but also provisions are relevant for prosumers. So the pieces of legislation, Renewable Directive and the governance regulations, these are the ones on which I will concentrate the most. Why? Also, I mean, primarily because they have already been agreed. The legislative process is formally not finalized, but there is an agreement achieved on them already, and they include quite a lot of really relevant provisions. Electricity Market Directive, I will go quickly through it because the process is not finalized, and actually the trilogue only started very recently. So there are provisions relevant, but what I will present to you it is what the Commission proposed. We don't know what we will get to at the end of the process. Now, the Renewable Directive, it includes very interesting things for prosumers. It includes definitions and other provisions relevant for renewable self-consumers and renewable energy communities. What is who is renewable self-consumer. You have a definition, which I'm quoting here. It's the one who self-generates renewable electricity for own consumption, but may also store and sell it. And the renewable self-consumer is operating within its premises or were allowed by a member state on other premises. Now, there are rights linked to renewable self-consumer, maybe very basic, but you will see this is the EU legislation. The EU legislation sets a general framework. So you have rights such as to become a self-consumer, to generate, to store, to sell energy, but also that self-consumers should be remunerated for the electricity fed to the grid, which is not the case in all the countries. And you have other more detailed provisions, like, for example, about the possibility for self-consumers to be situated in the same building. Now, what is also important to say is there is this general framework, general rights, but then, lots of things will be on member states, because member states, they have an obligation to assess barriers and potential and set enabling framework. So lots of things would be on member states to be established in relation to this quite general set things at EU level. What enabling framework would be? Just to give you examples, it would be ensuring financing, addressing regulatory barriers, access to support schemes. And what is also important is that in the Renewables Directive, you have a reference to NECPs and progress reports. And in NECPs, there should be already a summary of policies and measures under the enabling framework. And then later in the progress report, assessment of their implementation. Then also renewable energy community. The definition is very much about the structure and internal organization of renewable energy community. And again, you have all these rights for energy communities that have to be ensured now by member states. They are very similar to the ones of self-consumers. There are differences though. What you find also the same thing that I was saying about renewable self-consumers. Member states have to assess barriers and potential, and they have to provide an enabling framework to promote and facilitate development of energy communities. Again, we have basic things in EU legislation. Member states, they go further. How far they go, it's to see. Again, the Commission will be able to follow what's happening on this, similarly as in the case of self-consumers, through NECPs, but this case NECPs updates, which I think it's kind of, if I would think about the reasoning of the legislator, I would think, okay, it's true that in many countries energy communities are not very much developed, they are not established. It will take more time probably to set a proper framework, and we want this framework to be done properly. Therefore, we go for the update and not for NECPs. So it will be not immediately. So these are the basic things about the Renewables Directive. You see that there are lots of things, there are lots of basic rights, there is an obligation for member states to put a framework, and then this framework is stated already there that this framework will be followed by the EU. Now I go to the Electricity Market Directive really briefly. Just as I said, what I will be telling you very briefly is about Commission proposal, because the legislative process is much further back. Let's say it's the trilogue already started. And then, interesting for you to know that then once it is adopted, which will be either at the end of the year, probably next year, that's much more probable, the transposition deadline will be 12 months from entering into force So we will have to wait one more year. Now, what's interesting here, you have definitions and rights of active customer and local energy community. You have also other things which might be potentially interesting for prosumers and energy communities, but these are the most important things. Active consumer is larger than renewable self-consumer, because you have also participation in demand response or energy efficiency schemes. The same local energy community, you have a definition here. They are involved in activities of distributed generation, DSO, supplier, aggregator at local level. That was very, very quick because I wanted to get to the governance regulation. This is what we wanted to guide you through a little bit more. This is a new instrument. Its regulation does not require any transposition. What it is doing, it's setting governance mechanisms on how to implement strategies and measures at national level to meet the objectives of the Energy Union, to long-term Union greenhouse gas emissions commitment, etc., etc. Now, this is very much, governance regulation is very much about plans and reports. We will not talk about reports here. We will talk about, we will concentrate about plans and mainly about NECPs, because this is the most immediate thing. Now, NECPs, I'm saying it's the most immediate thing because draft NECPs, so NECPs are National Energy and Climate Plans that every country has to establish. Drafts, they have to be submitted to the Commission by the end of this year. Final ones will have to be submitted by the end of next year. Then there will be also updates, the final updates by mid-2024, but the procedure is the same as in relation of NECP, so you will have draft updates and final updates with the year difference. Now, NECPs are organized among 5 dimensions. Decarbonization, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy security, internal energy market, research, innovation, and competitiveness. Now, within each of these dimensions, you have description, information provided by each country on a number of things. I listed here just 4, which I thought were the most relevant in this case. And I will guide you more in detail through the first 2 ones, objectives, targets, and contributions, planned policies and measures. But I wanted also to draw your attention to the third and fourth, because they are maybe not immediately, like you don't think about prosumers immediately when looking at them, but actually, you know, when you look at general overview of investments to meet the objectives, you should also have prosumers in mind. If you look at to regulatory and not regulatory barriers, you could also have prosumers in mind. Now, I also want to draw your attention in the 4th bullet point, if applicable, because you will find it quite a lot in relation to prosumers. So, for example, so I wanted to give you examples of objectives in targets which are relevant to prosumers, either in a very straightforward way or less obvious. So, for example, under renewable energy, member states should provide, if applicable, so, you know, what it means, whether they will find it applicable or not, other trajectories and objectives, including long-term or sectoral ones, and among them, for example, renewable energy produced by cities, energy communities, and self-consumers. So this information on self-consumers, on energy communities may be there, if applicable. It's, on one hand, it's mentioning energy communities, self-consumers directly. On the other hand, there is this, if applicable. But there are also things like a contribution to the EU's binding target. You don't have prosumers mentioned directly, but it could possibly be relevant for them. I also mentioned some things about the market integration. Again, maybe not always completely obvious, but relevant for prosumers as well. Also, policies and measures. Again, one interesting thing, it's what I was already mentioning from the Renewable Directive side. Member states should indicate their policies and measures which they use to promote and facilitate the development of renewable self-consumption and renewable energy communities. There is also mentioning under energy efficiency local energy communities, so this is a larger concept. And again, I mean, under, for example, internal energy market, for example, member states should indicate policies and measures which they apply to ensure the non-discriminatory participation of renewables, not mentioned prosumers, but possibly relevant for them. There's also, again, one more time when prosumers are mentioned in NECPs, it's part 2 of the template. I call it template. You have at the end kind of information in the annex to the regulation, information that member states have to provide under the NECPs. And again, here energy balances and indicators, if applicable, the renewable energy produced by cities and energy communities. National trajectories on these elements. I also mentioned here very, very quickly long-term strategies. I will not guide you through them. They may be less relevant, but still, the thing is that they are not that immediate because they have to be submitted by 1st January 2020, but they include information such as emissions reductions in individual sectors, including electricity, investments on transition to a low greenhouse gas emissions economy. So, you know, it's not straightforward, might be interesting as well. I mentioned Annex 2 here on the presentation. It's also Article 14. And just to conclude, to say, well, you see that there is enabling legislation at EU level. This has to be put by member states in place. It can be done in different ways. You have, on the other hand, you have NECPs, which could potentially include strong provisions on prosumers and energy communities. Will they? This is to see. It's really worth trying to make them strong because they can, on one hand, help the national legislation, and on the other hand, they can provide additional things which we will not find in the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta, for the great overview that you have given us until now. Before we move on, I would like to ask if there is any immediate reaction or any immediate question coming from the audience. And again, I would like you to use the little icon with the hand and raise your hand and we will unmute you, or simply chat your question to us and we will read it out loud. I see that we have a technical question coming at the beginning. Yes, we will share the presentation indeed, and the webinar is also being recorded, so you will also have access to that. So if there is not immediate reaction, then I will ask everyone, of course, to pin down their question and write them on a piece of paper so that we are able to catch up later on this specific point. So Marta already gave us a quite interesting overview of the National Energy and Climate Action Plans, and also the parts that are a little bit more unexpected, in which we can actually find some information about, or some things that are relevant, of course, to prosumers. Now we move on, always looking into the national plans, And we try to focus a little bit more into how we can influence policies on prosumers and what is the place of prosumers in the different national plans as well as the strategies. And to talk about this with us today, we have Dirk van Sintien from RESCOP. Dirk, I'm going to give you the floor. Can you hear us, Dirk?
Yep, good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Okay, my presentation.
I can help you identify it. So if you go at the top of the window where you see display the slide, there is a list of presentations. You can just choose yours. It's the one that finishes with Dirk at the end.
I don't see it, but
I can help you with that. So again, you go at the top of the slide. You see there is viewing PROSEU webinar, and there is an arrow beside it. Unfortunately, I'm not the moderator, so I cannot do it, but I could ask Anya maybe to please do that for us and to select the correct presentation.
Yep, there it is.
Thank you very much, and you can pass back the ball to Dirk, please.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
Good morning once more. So I'm the president of RESCOP EU, which is the European Federation of Energy Cooperatives. So our perspective is the perspective of people doing it in their neighborhood, in their area. So of course we also are present at the European level to do advocacy. Unfortunately, our advocacy officer is on paternity leave, so he has a more let's say scientific look at it, whereas I'm more a practical guy. So now it must go down. It doesn't work.
I can help you again. So if you scroll with your mouse at the left side of the screen, you will see that there are two arrows, and you can click the one underneath, and I think after that you are able even to use the arrows on your keyboard.
Arrows, I don't see the arrows. Sorry.
You need to scroll over on the left side of the screen. You will see there is a zoom in and zoom out, and then there is like a number and two arrows, one going up and one going down. If you click on the one going down, you should be able to go to the next page.
Okay, that's it.
Fantastic.
So what will I try to give an answer to is the place of prosumers in national plans and what information ideas on prosumers should be included there. I will give you a concrete example because of my own country, which is complicated, Flanders, Wallonia, Brussels, Belgium. Actually, I don't have a clue what's going on. So I'll give you the example of the Netherlands. So first things first, what we have to do is to secure a good definition of a local energy community, a renewable energy community, and maybe it should be a citizen energy community. And that's also what we will try to have in the trialogues now, because yesterday, to give you a very concrete example, I was at a big event near Brussels on a research park where companies are situated to have a link to the University of Brussels, the Flemish University of Brussels. And there they think they are creating a local energy community of companies, not small ones, not SMEs, but rather big ones. They all are connected to the mid-tension grid. And there they think they are creating an energy community. I had some quite interesting discussions with them about this, even on Twitter now with our minister, Flemish Minister of Energy. So let's see what comes out of it. So we must secure a good definition. What is essential for us is that it's about citizens. It might also be about municipalities. They might be involved. There might be some small and micro companies involved, but the main focus is citizens. And this was a discussion I had yesterday. For us also, a renewable energy community is a part of, so it's energy communities focusing on renewables, whereas a local energy community might also be a supplier, or they might provide services or whatever. So so that's still not clear for everyone. I've seen presentations of people of the Commission where where this is not the Venn diagram that we would like to have. So we still have to. Important is that that we as energy cooperatives, but more broadly, that we get a good definition from Europe. This is just to give you a view of what's going on there in the trialogue. So on the left you see the original Commission's proposal, and then normally it's then the European Parliament that tries to make it better or change it. You see that it's longer. You see also that we were able to, at least I see it, and you should know that we were able to fit in certain things that make the whole definition better for us. And then you see that the Council, well, also has some changes, made some changes, but actually we are quite satisfied with when this would become the definition. So just to give you an idea of what's going on there. So there's a lot of work, a lot of talks to people, to member states, before to MEPs, before you're able to change something in this definition. So now I lost again the control. Next slide. I don't know how to do it. Sorry. I lost the thing on the left.
You cannot scroll on the. Okay, now you seem to be able to move it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for us, we looked at whatever comes from. Yeah. Now I see it again. Whatever comes from either the Parliament or the Commission itself, or so for us it's very important the autonomy, so that the local energy communities or the renewable energy communities, that they are autonomous, independent, and that citizens have control, that it's a non-profit purpose, that there is a concern for not only for the members but also for the community as a whole, and that there is democratic governance and ownership, and that the membership, not membership, the membership is open and voluntary. So we look at definitions out of these four angles and try to change things if something is not present or present. So that's how we are looking at it. Again, okay, there it is. So what's now on the table in the market design is that to the right you see the Renewable Energy Directive text on renewable energy communities. So this text is final, so the trialogue is over, but still this text might change when in the market design, when there the definition makes it necessary to change some things that renewable energy in the definition in the renewable energy design. So after seeing that some lobbies try to make it possible for large companies, for instance, to make energy communities, so we are now trying to introduce the word citizens energy community in the definition to make it very clear that the whole package was made to make the citizen, to put the citizen in the center of the energy transition and not businesses as it was in the past. So you can find, you will have the links, you can find more information on what we try to have. So what are the main opportunities for us? Marta touched upon this as well. So I won't go over it to save some time, so there are certainly some opportunities. we're quite happy to have a definition. It might not be perfect, but we can work with it. We should see to it that it's not used by big companies. The challenges are mainly how will this be implemented in the member states, and what is very important as well is that also the stated guidelines will be revised the coming year, and that once we have a definition, these stated guidelines, in the stated guidelines there can be detailed how we will be treated regarding the state aid that renewables still need sometimes. Of course, we have to engage with national regulators and energy network operators, and also we must include. We must be very aware that also in the national the NECPs, what's it again? that we have to that in the national plans, energy and climate plans, that we have to be included. And I will give you a concrete example of what our members in the Netherlands, together with made a coalition of what we could call community energy. So what the farmers and citizens and energy cooperatives do. So it's a process. The Dutch like to involve a lot of people. It's different in Belgium, but so they have by July they have a sort of climate agreement that will be included in the plan, and so to see what it doesn't work anymore. Yeah. So what our members, Prosumers is one of our board members of the Federation, the European Federation, and what they were able to in these talks, extensive talks with all stakeholders, what they were able to get is that there will be a target in the Dutch climate plan that all new renewable energy installations would be 50% community owned. What is the problem is that, for instance, if we're talking about wind energy, and if I look to Belgium, most favorable sites to install wind turbines are already a long time ago reserved or put under contract by big companies. In Germany, it went another way. So there quite a lot of the renewable energy installations are owned by farmers, groups of citizens, and energy cooperatives. But in Belgium, it's only 4%, for instance. So this means that we now are trying through local governments, municipalities, provinces, that we are trying that the local democracy tries to get from the Flemish region, Walloon region in Belgium, that whoever puts up wind turbines, that they have to offer a considerate amount, considered share to citizens. So this should be the result in every member state, that in these climate plans, energy and climate plans, that this is mentioned. So this should be an example for Belgium, for all the other member states. So, but of course now it's a target. Even in the Netherlands, the communities have to take this opportunity and fulfill this potential. So this doesn't mean that these renewable energy projects will be offered on a silver plate, as Stewart states it, but citizens and municipalities really have to bundle their forces and work together to grab this potential, this opportunity. So the main aim for us is that the energy transition leads us to a sort of energy democracy. And it should be a democratic transition, giving all citizens the opportunity to participate. And this is actually, when you read Clean Energy for All Europeans package, this is at least in words what is the aim of the package. So in this Dutch agreement, citizens' organization will also play an important role in the field of energy efficiency and gas-free neighborhoods. So in the Netherlands, their gas bubble is almost empty, and so they won't, that's their idea, they won't import Russian gas. No, they are really going for a gas-free future. This is also different in Belgium. We always imported the gas from the Netherlands mainly, but now if this Dutch supply stops, we would just buy from Norwegians or Algerians. So, but in the Netherlands, that's a very interesting evolution. And so citizens and neighborhoods and also housing corps, they have a lot of people live in houses from housing corps. So these citizens and their cooperatives will work very closely together with local municipalities and other parties to get to a gas-free future. Very soon in the Netherlands, this movement, they call themselves, you could call it the community power movement. They will soon be represented in all the Dutch regions with regional energy strategies, which are under development. And the citizens' initiatives will work hard to make sure that the commitments of the climate agreement, so the 50% ownership of the community, are included, and that energy projects are also carefully integrated in local communities. So this means that, for instance, also citizens find it very hard to cope with big wind projects that are just installed in their neighborhood without any possibility to participate. And so this is also essential in this Dutch climate agreement. So every citizen should get the chance in the Netherlands to actively participate in the energy transition. So they call themselves Energie Samen, which means energy together. And its members, they will work hard to encourage everyone to become a member of a renewable energy cooperative or to start a sustainable energy project. So we really think this is an achievement of one of our members. They put quite a lot of work in it, and I think this Dutch example can be an example for my own country and for all the neighboring member states of the European Union. Thank you. You can always contact us. In October, our advocacy officer is back, and so yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dirk, for the extensive presentation. And I really like the fact that we could also look into more of a practical view with a real-life example. So I think it's actually an added value for our conversation. Before we move on to the next presentation, I will take the opportunity to read out loud a couple of questions that came through. And I will start with the first one that is actually directed to you from Malte. I'm reading it out loud now. He says, "Hi Dirk, in Germany it is very common that a local renewable energy community cooperates with a bigger company. That usually doesn't count an SME anymore. For example, any lists Greenpeace Energy, Naturalstrom, EWS Schonau." He's asking, was this an intended consequence?
Well, of course, you can always work together with the big developer. My own cooperative, EcoPower, also has been doing it. In the harbor of Ghent, for instance, we worked together with the former Belgian, it was a public producer, SPE. Now it's taken over by EDF, the big EDF from France. But what is essential is that they don't become a member of your local energy community. So you can work together with them, but they shouldn't become part of your cooperative. They shouldn't control you. They shouldn't start a local energy community. So that's what has been going on in Belgium, for instance, like ENGIE, EDF, all players, they all started their own energy cooperative. So this is like wolves disguising themselves in sheep. So it's a Dutch expression. I don't know whether it is an English expression, but the definition should make this clear. We can work together with big companies, but they shouldn't control the energy communities. They shouldn't be part of it.
Thank you very much for your answer. And then maybe one more question, and then I will move on to the next panelist. I hope we will have more time for discussion later on. I know that we are running a little bit late, but it's for you, Marta, actually. Claire is asking, I lost the question of Claire. There you go. Do you already know when the stated guidelines will be revised?
I don't have a precise answer to that, but I think that state aid guidelines are running until 2020. So the process should be starting soon. But I will not have more information. But in Brussels, I know that even in my organizations, I have colleagues working on that quite extensively. So and the issues of prosumers, I think they will be also taking into account. But it is to start probably very soon, or maybe already ongoing.
Thank you very much. And I invite you to keep on typing your questions or to raise your hand after the next presentation to continue the discussion. So now we move on from discussing challenges and practical examples to continue exploring and defining our objectives and trajectories for the future. And we'll take us through that on how consumers. Can you unmute yourself, Christian?
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Okay, hi, we can hear you perfectly. So I would invite Anya to please select the correct presentation and pass the ball to Christian.
Okay, good morning. I hope you can all see the slides.
We can.
Slides EcoUnion. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Christian Patrick. I work for EcoUnion based in Barcelona. We are a small NGO and we are also part of the PROSEU consortium. I will talk about the question how to define objectives and trajectories for prosumers. And to do so, I will look into the generation potential of prosumers that goes beyond the self-consumption, and also propose or discuss a few potential indicators for later reporting. As we have seen from Marta, the governance regulation says that member states shall report, if applicable, national trajectories and objectives for renewable energy produced by energy communities and self-consumers. Now, this, if applicable, can translate actually in that some countries don't really report on that. We have seen the NECP draft from Sweden, where they don't have any renewable energy objectives by 2030, and then they say it's for prosumers, there's also nothing applicable, which we find could be improved, basically. However, Sweden has a very high renewable energy share already. But now, what are desirable and realistic objectives? We have seen from Dirk's presentation that the Netherlands put up 50%, and I will give you an idea of how high we can actually, or we could actually go with this share of renewables, of prosumers in renewables. An important note is that the Renewable Energy Directive and the governance regulation use the term self-consumers, but they do allow generation beyond self-consumption, which means that for technology like solar PV that can be used for both individual and prosumers and energy communities, that actually any rooftop installation or almost any PV installation could potentially fall under the self-consumption legislation or energy community legislation, which Marta proposed. This kind of opens your mind a little bit, maybe, that you could consider basically any PV project part, or especially the rooftop PVs, as part of the prosumers. Now, what is the potential for rooftop PV and thus also prosumers? You see here on the slide that there was a study from the European Commission which said that the residential rooftop potential in the European Union is 238 gigawatts. Another study from the IEA came up with a number for urban areas, which doesn't include rural areas, apparently, of 500 gigawatts. And then there's another study where they show, I don't have the final number yet, I requested it, but I didn't get it. So you see here on this slide a study where you see the rooftop potential per region, and you see the dark colored regions where you have more than 20 gigawatts, and there are at least 5 of those or 4 of those regions, or 5. And then there are others between 20 and 25 gigawatts. So I don't have the total number here of what that ends up to, but you will be well beyond of what we currently have on deployed SPV in Europe. I put up the number here. We are currently at about 108 gigawatts PV capacity, including ground-based capacity, because the current PV rooftop capacity is only 17 gigawatts in the European Union. The study from 2017 from the European Commission said that in 2030 there may be 32 gigawatts installed, which would only be 13% of the residential rooftop potential. So actually not very high numbers there yet, and that means that we really have a lot of space upwards of where prosumer projects could go. This means now that the total numbers would have to be boiled down on a national level, and the potential trajectories, or there are potential trajectories given in this European Commission study, but we think they may not be realistic, or they would have to be reviewed. For example, for Spain, only 80 megawatts would be to be expected in 2030, which is very much below the 13 gigawatts rooftop potential for residential only. By contrast, the study from CE Delft, CE Delft is also a consortium part of PROSEU, they estimated that 50% of the households could produce energy by 2030, and about 50% of all electricity could be produced by prosumers in 2050. So that gives an idea of how far they think it could all go with prosumers and their shares. In addition to rooftop PV, you can have any other renewable energy technology in a community project, like also Dirk mentioned, for wind or small hydro biomass and so on. So the actual limit of prosumer projects in the energy supply can be very high. So some may say you want only 10% prosumers, or the Netherlands now said 50%, but it could also go to 75 or even 100% in theory. The restrictions may be there of financial nature, that prosumer projects or communities may not be able to raise enough funding to finance the projects, or the example that Dirk mentioned, that there are not enough, that they don't get the permissions anymore. But governments could set up quite ambitious targets for the share of prosumers in their objectives and trajectories. But to do that, they actually should conduct studies for their countries to know the potentials, and then to decide also in hopefully a participatory process which share prosumers should have in that. Just briefly on the indicators, I think, or according also to the Commission legislation now, there needs to be definitions or indicators per prosumer type. That means household, energy communities, cities are also mentioned in the legislation, and then companies and farmers. Companies could be commercial entities like SMEs or also larger industry. And then by prosumer type, you would need to measure and report the capacity installed, the energy fed into the grid, also the energy self-consumed. That's also part of the reporting requirements. And then maybe additionally battery storage capacity or thermal storage capacity. This last point brings me to a few other just considerations, because this is the fourth bullet here, that the definitions are not fully consistent across the different across the directives and the governance regulation, because sometimes they say only electricity and sometimes they say energy with regards to prosumers. So if we talk energy, that could also potentially mean heat, and then this broadens the scope even further with regards to technologies and with regards to shares of renewables from prosumer or prosumer initiatives. Just a few other considerations. Would be good to have same thresholds when reporting system sizes, below 1 kilowatt, below 3 kilowatt, and so on, to make comparison possible in statistics across countries. It would also be good to define the non-prosumer type owners of installations. So if it's not a prosumer, what is it then? Is it a utility? Is it a project developer? Other type of investors or banks? It would be useful, I think, to further go into that. And another important point is that there should be separate meters to measure the self-consumed energy or electricity from rooftop installations especially. And yeah, summing up, the recommendations are we as prosumer advocates should request that member states commission studies on the uptake scenarios. For 2018, this will be now quite tight for the draft, but I think in 2019 there should still be time to do that for the final NECPs. We should try to get a comparable methodology to calculate technical potentials. There are a lot of different studies that use different approaches on how to measure the rooftop PV potentials. And by doing that, we should all be mindful that the capacity of prosumer projects can be very high, or the share of the capacity. As I said, it could go up to 100%, and now we have seen Netherlands is already putting up 50%. So yeah, we should not be too happy if a country says we want only 10% of prosumer in the energy share. The prosumer groups and prosumer types would be also important to define, so that we have then the right statistics or good statistics on which type of prosumer owns which kind of installations and the capacities. Yeah, this is it for now. I'm happy to take on any question now or later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was asked a question in parallel. So I would like to invite everyone to write your questions in the chat or to raise your hand if you have any quick remark or anything burning that you would like to share with us. I see that we have a question from the floor. Just a moment. Okay, so the question comes from Nicolas Deruel. Solar potential is very clear, but if it is not relevant to save money for self-consumers, only small parts of these consumers will do it. What are the financial levers which we could use or could be used by the country to allow this development? This is the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, most of profitable projects are big ones, not the small ones, which could be held by everyone and small citizen energy communities. Christian, an immediate reaction from your side.
Yeah, well, definitely, if there is no, if it's not possible to save money or at least to have a more or less profitable project for a prosumer, then they won't do it. But this is part now of basically what we are hoping comes with this new legislation, that governments put in place the right frameworks that allows prosumers to have projects in place that are beneficial, or that are where they don't lose money, or where they can earn at least a little bit of money. Countries like Spain, this is not the case yet. Here you have to, if you are a small prosumer, you have to give away for free the electricity that you feed into the grid, and apart from that, it's a very complicated process to get connected. And now this will hopefully change with this new legislation. The most profitable projects, yes, maybe larger ones, but yeah, the idea behind prosumers is not only making money. The legislation clearly says, or the directive clearly says, the energy communities don't have the profit as their main goal. The goal of energy communities is to have value add on the local level, value add on the local level. And some other things, but it's not only profits. So yeah, while people should not lose money with all that, they should not also have in mind that they will get rich with it. I hope
Thank you very much.
Answers the question.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I see that Dirk has raised his hand. So Dirk, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Just to give you an idea of the size, indeed, most of the projects of our members of the energy cooperatives might be small, solar panels on a school. But to give you an example of a very big one, 2 energy cooperatives from the Netherlands, with together they have 5,000 members. They were able to build a wind farm of 240 million euro. So it might be big. So also in the Netherlands now, there's a repowering on Flevoland. There's a project that was originally only from farmers, but now the communities are involved, and that's an even bigger project. So it's not citizens together can for instance, in Flanders, they say we must build 1,000 wind turbines. That's 3 billion euros, but the citizens, they have more than 240 billion euro of savings in the bank. So we shouldn't leave the big projects to the big companies. We can do it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. I think that's an important notion. And also, as Marta said, for investments, that's actually an indicator that I should have mentioned as well. The investment carried out by prosumers and energy communities should be tracked as well. And then giving the numbers that you mentioned, yeah, are quite impressive. So there could actually be indeed a lot of money coming together from prosumers and initiatives. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. And again, I encourage you to continue typing your questions or raising your hand. And now it is my pleasure to give the floor to a couple of guest speakers that we have actually today. We have asked a couple of NGOs that are actually working European-wide, but that are here based in Brussels, to give us a brief overview of some of the initiatives that they are carrying out in terms of national plans. So I would like maybe to ask, to start with, to Klaus Rohe to take the floor. I think you should be able to unmute yourself, Klaus. You work for Can Europe. Maybe we can check if your microphone works. I will ask Anya to please unmute Klaus. Can you hear us, Klaus? Okay, maybe we try to fix this technical issue with Klaus so we can ask our second guest speaker of today, Arianna Vitali Roschini, sorry for the misspelling of your name, from WWF to contribute first.
Yeah.
Hi Arianna, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much for being with us.
No problem. Thank you to you, Georgia and Marta. So my name is Arianna, and I work at the WWF European Policy Office here in Brussels. So I was working mainly on the advocacy towards the clean energy package, and now since an agreement on the efficiency and renewables directive have been found, I'm starting working on the implementation and mainly on the national energy and climate plans, what Marta and others have just presented. So very briefly, I mean, and Klaus can add, because of course we are also working in very good cooperation with CAN Europe. What we are doing is trying to ensure that the NECPs, those plans, are basically transformative in nature, and that will be compliant with the Paris Agreement achievement. It looks like a big task, and it is a big task, but the idea is really to hope that member states will not draft these plans by doing a tick the box exercise and just do the minimum of what is required in the governance regulation, but try to go a bit beyond of the requirements and ensure that their policy towards 2030 are actually coherent with the long-term decarbonization objective of the Paris Agreement and of the decarbonization objective that they will have to set on the long-term strategies. So crucial for us at WWF will be, of course, looking at the energy efficiency target and provisions and the renewable energy target and provisions, including self-consumers, of course. How we are doing that is basically, I'm here based in Brussels, so I can't do much to influence the draft plans that member states are currently preparing. So I'm here in support of our WWF national offices in Belgium, Italy, Germany, and many others that are working directly with their government and giving their input to the first drafts that are due, as mentioned by others, by the end of this year already. So, so together as well with CAN and Klaus, we are coordinating at Brussels level to give input to our members and give them the necessary information on the requirement of the governance regulation and of the NECPs, and trying to do our best to empower them to do a good advocacy with their government. Then I think another important step is the fact that after the draft that are submitted by the Commission by the end of the year, the European Commission itself will need to assess these drafts and make country-specific recommendations to those member states. And the member states will need to take into account those recommendations when drafting their final national climate and energy plans. So I think in the next 6 months, the first half of 2019, we will have another big window of opportunity to improve the draft that member states have submitted by working as well with the European Commission and pointing out to the relevant desk officers on the European Commission on the shortcomings that we can see on the draft. And therefore, that will be important as well for the prosumer provisions. When you realize that maybe a draft plan fell short of what you would like to see in terms of prosumers, it will be important as well to contact again the European Commission and point out what are the parts that are missing, where can be improved, whether they are compliant or not with the legislation, and try to ensure that the Commission makes those recommendations to the member states, because at that point then member states will need to take them into account. So that's how we are approaching the work on the NECPs in terms of products. As this is more national tailored information, we are planning to have a short briefing with the key principles for influencing the NECPs, but as said, most of the work will need to be done at the national level with national data and the knowledge of the policies on the ground. So that's it for my side.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I would like to try again now to connect with Klaus, if it's possible. I understand that his microphone should be working now. I think you can Klaus, can you hear us? Maybe tweaking a little bit with the volume. I think we still have a challenge here, but no fear, as you would say. We still have one more contribution to go through, and in the meantime,
hello?
We can try. Oh, now we can hear you, Klaus. Hi,
yeah?
hello.
Ah,
hello.
hi. Yes, hi.
Great. Okay.
Yes,
then
hi.
no further
Yes.
anticipation. Please share your activity.
I will be very brief. Sorry for the technical problems here, but I hope you can hear me well. And also thanks to Arianna for the quick update. I will just maybe add a couple of thoughts from our network. So I'm working for Climate Action Network Europe. We are a European-wide NGO coalition of organizations working on the energy and climate legislation. So similarly to what Arianna said, we have also been working previously on the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Directive, also the governance regulation. And now we're a bit in this kind of process to plan our activities for the actually implementation of the process of the NECPs. So I think the main point was already mentioned by Arianna. So we want to really make sure that in the next years that the NECPs that are submitted by the member states are transformational in their impact, so that they actually can be used also from civil society perspective to really be linked with the long-term strategies and to be linked also with the long-term objectives of the Paris Agreement. And at the moment, we are doing a scoping exercise exactly of seeing a bit where our members stand at the national level. So we're preparing a survey that we will send out to all our network to see actually which member states have already launched public consultations, for example, at the member state level. Also on the draft NECPs, because our understanding now is that only a very limited amount of countries is maybe relatively advanced in submitting the drafts. So we first need to get a better overview and then also activate a bit our members to really engage and demand public consultations also at the NECP drafts. And then at the same time, we're preparing and doing a bit of capacity building for our network. And also, in cooperation with other Brussels-based NGOs, including WWF, about how to assess the drafts, and then also subsequently how to maybe feed in to the country-specific recommendations that the European Commission will conduct. And there we will actually look into kind of sets of kind of key priority pillars or key aspects of the NECPs that we will analyze. So those actually relate to the ambition of the 2030 targets, to kind of analyze in how far are the policies proposed by the member states in the NECPs in line with their kind of contribution for the collective European climate and energy targets for 2030. Then there's another pillar focused on the more long-term approach. So about the kind of Paris consistency, are the NECPs in line with what member states need to deliver for the Paris Agreement and also towards the EU's long-term strategy? So are the kind of short-term, mid-term policies proposed consistent? Then we will also look into transparency, how much details will actually be publicly accessible. How far can we assess also the second part of the NECPs, so the kind of projections that the member state does in terms of impacting of the proposed policies. How transparent are those, and how transparent is the entire procedure? And that links also with another pillar, which is about participation. So how far are the processes open for civil society to engage? Maybe a last point that we also want to look into, and I will finish with this my brief intervention, is also looking into the the proposed policies in the NECPs and see in how far they are credible, and how far they are also consistent with maybe other strategies at the member state levels. For example, if the country has a transport strategy, and we need to ensure that the policies proposed in the NECPs do not contradict or are not in contradiction with other national strategies. Yeah, that's a bit where we are in our network. Happy to hear questions or comments. But thanks again for the invitation, and thanks for the webinar.
Thank you so much to both Klaus and Arianna for sharing all these different activities and initiatives that they are carrying out. Like you are going to have a very busy agenda in the next couple of months. I would kindly ask you to please mute your microphone, because I'm afraid I can hear a lot of background noise. Thank you so much for that. So thank you, Klaus, also for raising the point of transparency and the different points also on public consultation on the different drafts. And taking really the start from that point, I would like to ask our last speaker of today, Sebastian Bechtel from Client Earth, to take us through a little bit what is the, how can prosumer initiative really can be involved in drafting these national plans. So I would ask Anya to please select the correct presentation and to then give the ball to Sebastian. The floor is yours.
Yes, hello, can you hear me? Okay, hello everyone. So yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I will give a short presentation on how you can get involved in the drafting of the NECPs that we've already heard so much about. We have limited time, so we go through the slides quite quickly. Apologies for that, but you can then go through it in your own time afterwards. Marta has already mentioned that there's a number of different instruments that are included in the governance regulation that are open to public participation. I will be focusing here on the preparation of the Integrated National Energy and Climate Plans, the NECPs, but there's also some information included in the end of the presentation on long-term strategies and the multi-level climate and energy dialogue. So as a recap, the NECPs have measures on 5 different broad areas. So these are very important plans that will determine energy development, energy policy over the next 5 to 10 years in the member states. And the governance regulation accordingly also envisages certain public participation requirements. These are primarily included in the governance regulation itself, in particular in Article 10 thereof. But these requirements are also derived from the Aarhus Convention. This is an international agreement that both the EU and all the member states are parties to, and it's therefore also important to understand that you derive also rights, participatory rights, from this instrument as well. So the elements that of a participation process, or the specific participation rights you have, is first of all that participation must take place at an early stage in order to be effective. For the NECPs, that would concretely mean usually that this should be on the draft plans prepared by the member states. However, as a form of political compromise for the first round of NECPs, it is envisaged that the participation shall only take place in 2019. That's at least what Article 10 states. However, the governance regulation states itself it should be early and effective. The Aarhus Convention says participation should be when all options are open, and taken together, we do believe that it is worthwhile to encourage your national authorities to also conduct participation already this year in 2018. So to explain this at hand of this graphic, you see on the first arrow, this is the preparation phase. This is where the member states is basically gathering the information and drafting the plan. And this will take place in 2018, still in this year, because the draft NECPs need to be sent to the Commission by the end of the year, by 21st December. So we would encourage you to contact your public authorities, even if they do not conduct a public participation phase before, and remind them of their obligation, in particular under the Aarhus Convention, to have early participation already this year. And then the second arrow, that will be in 2019, so that will be then the participation phase on the final plan, so sort of the second phase. And that's very much required very clearly required under Article 10 of the governance regulation. So this will be the participation phases in 2018-2019. The next phases will then be on the updates of the NECPs in 2023 and on the next NECP in 2028, and the same requirements will apply. The second element, or the second right you have for the participation, is that the member states must make sure that the public, so that everyone is informed of the possibility to participate. And they should do this by any appropriate means. This includes electronic media, but it should also include public notices actually mentioned in the recitals of the governance regulation itself. So it's really an obligation on them to make sure the public is informed and to take sufficient time to inform the public, so to not make a notice and then the participation phase starts the next day. The third element is to provide all relevant information, all relevant documents that the member states have used, the authorities have used themselves to draft the plan. And so these should be made available as part of the participation. So obviously the draft plan itself needs to be made available, but also comprehensive information on the assumptions, the parameters, the methodologies used in preparation of the plan. The next element is that there needs to be a possibility to actually participate. So you need to have a chance to submit your comments, and there needs to be, again, reasonable time frames for that. And so this includes measures to allow you to provide written comments, to submit written comments online in writing. But it should also, something that you should ask for is also that there's public hearings organized, that workshops are organized, because that really shows, the experience shows that this is a way to have an effective participation phase. Finally, and probably the most important, is that the authorities must take due account of the comments received. So they really need to feed in, and this is obviously the goal of the whole process, why there needs to be sufficient information, sufficient time, and they need to include in the final plan a description of how they've done that, so how they have consulted the public and what the outcomes of this participation phase have been. So this is a way to control that as well, and to show, to make sure that the member states actually go through this exercise and don't just make a box ticking of, yes, we have consulted. So to conclude or to summarize, what we would encourage you to do is remind your authorities of the 5 obligations that I've just gone through: early participation, notifying the public, providing the information, gather views, and take the comments into account, and to have always sufficient time for each of these steps, sufficient time to notify, sufficient time for the public to consider the information, sufficient time for the public to comment, and then also sufficient time for the authorities to take that outcomes into account. We would also encourage you to remind your authorities of their obligation under the Aarhus Convention. That is, on the one hand, that participation must take place when all options are open. So I already mentioned this includes participation already this year, and to take due outcome of the outcome of public participation, because this is wording that is not mentioned in the governance regulation, but this is a very important, or perhaps the most central part of the successful participation phase. What we would also encourage you to do is request your authorities to conduct a strategic environmental assessment. The governance regulation does not require a strategic environmental assessment. This is a separate obligation, a separate legal act. But nonetheless, the governance regulation gives room to meet the public participation requirements by conducting an SEA. And the advantage of conducting an SEA is that the public authorities have a process in place through which they will generate information in the preparation of the plan. And you have perhaps possibilities to get access to another formalized assessment of what they're actually considering. And finally, in the context of information, you should not rely on the fact that information will necessarily be disclosed proactively, even if there is this legal requirement. Therefore, we are encouraging you to request information from your authorities at an early stage. Ask them what is any information, any documents you have used in preparation of the plans for any methodologies, assessments you have conducted. So you can have access to that, and then also inform your own participation, because you can rely on it. And so now I have a couple of bit of further information on the further slides, but I'll just mention what it is, because we do not have so much time left. There is public participation envisaged as well for the long-term strategies. This is conducted in a very similar way, and I have here slides with information on that for your own reading. And the governance regulation also envisages a multi-level climate and energy dialogue. That's a more permanent dialogue on climate and energy policy for everyone. This can include the participation on the NECPs and the long-term strategies. And this is something that should be set up and which should give you the opportunity to participate on a more continuous basis. And I have finally here a slide on a procedure that is going on in parallel before the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee, which is also following up after a case that has been brought actually already in 2012, so a long time ago, but it's constantly monitoring compliance with the public participation requirements under the NECPs. And therefore, this is a process where you can provide information as well on anything that are best practices, things that go wrong in your member state. And we would also be interested in hearing anything on such so to say bad practices, so we can bring that to the attention of the European Commission and perhaps the Aarhus Compliance Committee. Then here's finally some further links, including some good practice examples. And that concludes my presentation 1 minute before 12 o'clock. So we're just on time.
Thank you very much. I think it was an incredibly interesting overview of what are the opportunities that are coming in the next months. I would like to anyway ask for your patience, although I'm mindful of the time, of course, and to use a couple of minutes to give the final opportunity to all the people in the audience to raise their questions. So please feel free to either book yourself a question through raising your hand, or to just type it for us in the Q&A or in the chat function. If there is no other question, just a moment, I'm seeing a few of them coming through. Maybe Anya, you can help me. I see that there is one question, but I cannot access it. Perhaps you received it personally. I don't see it. Apologies for this. I'm just trying to read them out loud.
Georgia, this is Christian. May I just use the time to just say a few words what PROSEU plans on NECPs in the next step?
Just 1 second. I actually found the question.
Okay.
Okay, so it's from Nicolas Deruel. He's asking, does that mean that each country will have a web platform for NECP where we will be able to register as a public contributor if we are a local energy community, for example?
So thank you very much for the question. On the NECPs, what is the idea is that you should have the possibility to participate, and there must be a commenting phase. And what we're saying is that this should be ideally organized through an online platform, but that's the usual way it's organized, that you have a possibility to submit comments online. But this will depend on what the member states does concretely, the way it does it in practice. The other thing that exists is the multi-level climate and energy dialogue, and this is supposed to be a platform that is to be set up as well, and through by the member state, and through which the member state can then also conduct its participation on the NECPs and the long-term strategies. But considering the time frame, I presume that it will probably take a bit for the member states to actually get this up and running, unless they already have a platform like this. So this will likely be more for the next participation phases rather than the 2018-2019. But that will depend on how well organized the the member state in question is as well.
Thank you very much. So last call for questions. And in the meantime, then, while we leave you the last possibility to type down your questions, I will ask then Christian to take the floor again and to let us know what are the next steps in our PROSEU work, and how do we need to interact with our project activities. Christian.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. Yeah, we just have one brief slide on what we want to do in the future. So we will continue to gather data and information on the NECP processes in the member states, and I guess also in close linkage with CANI. And we want to assess in 2019 or 20 the prosumer-related aspects that have been put up in the NECPs in the draft and the final version. So we will try to publish some information on that within our project as well. And then we will, our project goes until early 2021, so we will continue working on prosumer-related national policies, also try to provide guidance, and we would be happy to keep on discussing with other stakeholders and reviews any related aspects that we could introduce into our project, where we also will work with so-called living labs to make very concrete proposals on how prosumers could be part of the energy union. Yeah, that's it already. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, for inviting everyone to link up with our project. Don't forget that there are a lot of opportunities to exchange with us, not only receiving communication from the research that we are doing. As I mentioned before, our idea is really to build an integrated knowledge framework to obtain a cross-sectoral understanding of renewable energy prosumerism, and trying to identify and assess what kind of incentive structures are there to enable the mainstreaming of prosumerism in the energy transition. So lots of information, lots of research coming up from our side, and we look forward to exchanging with you, of course, and also to share knowledge and to share practices to see how this can really become a reality for our future. Specifically, I would like to raise your attention to a community that we are currently developing, a community of interest, to which we warmly invite you to participate and to become a part, to really look into how we can develop this transition all together. So with these final words, and inviting you to visit our website, www.proseu.eu, I would like to thank very, very much all the different speakers, the panelists, and the contributors that took the time today to join us, and also a big thank you to all the participants that have been so actively engaging in the conversation. As I mentioned, all the presentations as well as the recording will be available on our website, and if you have any questions, any burning issue that you would like to raise with us in the upcoming hours or days, please feel free to contact us, and we will make sure to share your questions with the appropriate expert for an answer. So thank you very much to everyone, and a big round of virtual applause to all the participants, and also to our technical moderator, Anya. Thank you for all of your help. I see that Dirk has his hand raised. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
No, I just said hi.
Hi, everyone, and I wish everyone a lovely day. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.